I wouldn't target just any company that needs supply chain software. That just doesn't make sense because every company needs it. But you want the ones whose supply chain is like already outgrew a spreadsheet, which means a simple spreadsheet doesn't work anymore. So in this case, and that's not the case for all software businesses, but in this case, complexity is the thing we're filtering for, not industry and revenue, because you could have a $2 billion company with one plant and one warehouse, and they will have smaller problems than a $400 million company, which is substantially smaller, but it has 9 sites in 4 countries. You want the second one because there your product will have the highest ROI. Okay? And there are 3 things that need to be true. A goods move through more than one node. All right? So you have plants, distribution centers, stores, carriers, ports. The more handoffs they have, the more places there are for the whole planet and the whole supply chain to break. All right? So one warehouse and one truck is not really a network. So this is one thing that needs to be true. Then you want $500 million plus. If you're like targeting bigger companies, 5+ distribution centers or 100+ stores. I've chosen these numbers based on like a 7% freight saving. If you do more than that, obviously you can calculate everyone who can get a ROI from you fits in here. All right. So if that's 100 million plus or 50, that's fine. This is just my example. All right. Make sure the math just works. And then someone already has a title, so they already hired someone to do this stuff. So if you have a VP of supply chain, for example, on the org chart, that means the problem is big enough that they had to hire someone and pay them money to fix this. And so they already knew the problem existed and they spent money for it, which is not little, by the way. Salary is not the only payment, but you know this. But the problem is big enough to actually find someone, hire, pay them, so on and so forth. And so if we do these things, we have about 23,000 companies, which is a 10, right? And so we can build lists for like manufacturers over 500 million with 3 or more plants, retailers with 100+ stores or 5 distribution centers, consumer goods and food companies with cold chain or a short shelf life, right? Automotive suppliers with multi-country tier 1 supply, 3PLs and logistics providers running client warehouses and wholesalers and distributors with 1,000+ SKUs, right? That's a good list if we can find these. And you don't want to email like single site companies under 100 million, in my case, software services, anything without physical goods, because you're literally useless for them. Companies that only dropship, same thing. Anyone already a customer, so we want to filter those out so they don't get our outbound messaging or an open deal in the CRM. So filter these out. Anyone who just signed a competitor in the last 18 months, that just, I mean, in some cases you can do a buyout if it's a big company, and that just works, especially if you can show why yours is better and if they have problems with the current one. But this is just nice, and titles that would lose work, the problem got solved. So if you email people that if you implement your solution, they would get fired because they get useless, these people don't want you to win. So you need to go higher up in the company, but I'll get to that. And so you can start with like automotive, consumer goods, grocery, convenience, industrial manufacturing. You have all these other ones. But I just start with the blue ones here because they have the most nodes, most carriers, and yeah, also the shortest patience for the consumer for being late. So they actually have a problem to solve.